for our outstanding panel and all of the attendees who are here to join us this evening. What I'm going to do is provide a brief introduction to the speakers, and we'll have about a five-question panel discussion. We have a suggested structure, but we can sort of, be a little bit less, formal with how we approach this. But before we start the introduction, I just wanted to note a few things because we're here to talk about science writing and science communication on Substack. And there's a few qualities that all of our panelists have. And so first, they're all experts in their field, right? Whether it's in research, epidemiology, science and tech reporting, they've all honed their craft and they're bringing that expertise to Substack. Second, they have a very unique beat within the space. Timothy Lee has taken a deep dive into reporting about all things AI, right? So maybe you're going to read about the latest safety data with self-driving cars, or maybe if you're going to be reading from your local epidemiologist, you're going to be hearing about the latest COVID-19 data, where there's upticks, all about the flu, when to get a vaccine, topics that affect us all and have a little bit more of an aerial view with public health. In other cases, we may hear from Dr. Thorp about a very human perspective and a narrative about scientific research. He has the global voice in science and is bringing a very personal lens into topics that may really resonate with people. And third is they all use Substack a little bit differently. And so that's why we're really excited to talk to everyone tonight. Some people may have it as a main news vehicle, sort of like the Washington Post and CNN, right? This is going to be your first stop to get news out in a very timely fashion to all of your readers. In other cases, it may be a little bit more of an accessory, right? You have a lot of things that you're doing during the day, but you want to stay connected to people, share news about research, use it in a way maybe how X, formerly known as Twitter, was to really spark conversations, sustain conversations about science and research. And in other cases, I think for many of the speakers, it could complement other efforts that you're doing with your day job, with Substack, to really put a microphone on health and science issues that you want to get out to the public. And Substack allows you to do that, with a very quick turnaround, almost instantaneously, whenever you're ready to publish it. And so the reason I mention this is because everyone is here to sort of learn from the best in Substack about, how to publish content, and maybe you'll resonate with certain things to advance your own science writing and communications. And so without further ado, I'll provide brief introductions. Dr. Holden Thorp is the editor-in-chief of the Science family of journals. He is well known for providing a thoughtful, timely, and human perspective about issues that could help accelerate or affect research in the US and throughout the world. He's also known as the voice of scientific research. His Substack, called Science Forever, started in 2022 and publishes about once or twice a month. It brings humanity to this larger scientific narrative and complements other perspectives that he publishes regularly with a wide audience of researchers, experts, and the general public. Timothy Lee is a veteran reporter with a computer science degree who has carved out a very unique space with reporting, writing, and sharing all things related to AI and technology. Before he went independent, he worked at national outlets like the Washington Post and Vox.com. During this period, he reported on all facets of the economy, and using his Substack, Understanding AI, which started in 2023, to have the same focus. How is AI affecting our society? What's going on? What's the latest news? Why should we care? He posts content about once a week and also includes some podcasts with his articles. And then we have Andrea Tamayo and Dr. Katelyn Jetelina with your local epidemiologist. Now, this is a Substack that started as a newsletter during the pandemic 5 years ago to provide updates about COVID-19. It's now transformed into a comprehensive Substack, #1 in science, about a variety of public health topics: COVID-19, the flu, mumps, measles, RSV, food recalls, ticks, and unfortunately, gun violence. And Dr. Jetelina has been named one of Time's most influential people in health, and she now has a whole team of experts, including Andrea, who's here with us tonight, reporting on public health topics from a national level and also regional pockets, what's happening in New York and California. And the team shares regular content in different formats throughout the week. Now, Andrea is a science and health journalist with degrees in biology, science communications, and international relations. She's written for a variety of publications, including Scientific American, Stat, and Science. She uses a very creative background to find ways to get, all of the science news from your local epidemiologist out to readers in a way that's really engaging and resonates with people in different venues. And she's also written for institutions like Stanford Medicine and the Broad Institute. Now, our audience, as Liz mentioned, it's very diverse backgrounds. And so it might be, just like the speakers, or maybe scientists, science journalists, institutional science writers, freelancers, hobbyists, students in science writing programs who may be looking to launch their career or use Substack as a way to create a digital portfolio. Maybe it could be something they use to apply for future internships, fellowships, jobs, maybe even pitch a book proposal if they have a really siloed topic that they're, developing during the program. And so what we're going to do is we have 5 questions. We can, allow about 5 to 10 minutes for each. We can move around, spend more time in one area, come back to others. It's just a suggestion. And if there's enough time at the end, we'll have a short Q&A. I'm not sure that there will, so you can send questions in the chat, and me and Liz will do our best to, see the questions and try to answer them in real time throughout the format. Otherwise, I'm going to include a link to the speakers' Substacks and their handles so you can follow them and stay in touch after the event. And the first question, which I'll also include in the chat, is what is the origin of your Substack? How and why did you start it in your own words, and how has it grown over time? And we can just sort of go in an order. We can start with Dr. Thorpe and just sort of pass it down from there.
Okay, well, I'm a Substack newbie by comparison to the accomplishments of my fellow panelists, so I'm mostly here to hear from them. But I started mine because um, I do a lot of reporting, and I have a few things that I'm really interested in that uh, don't really belong on the science editorial page all the time. But I have, a great platform already to write for the editorial page for science, which some people think I do every week, but I don't. It's usually about twice a month that I have a column there. And, that's traditional journalism with an editor who rewrites everything and makes me sound super good. So, Substack is where I put things that are more personal about me, or a few topics that I'm really interested in, like autism, because I'm on the spectrum and I'm writing a book about autism, and social media and its effect on mental health, which I did some really deep dives on for some columns. So, because I get paid to write editorials for science, I don't try to make any money on stuff Substack, but it's a terrific platform and I enjoy interacting with the people who subscribe to me on it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Tim, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name's Tim Lee. I'm a reporter. I was, as Jessica said, I was at more traditional publications. Most recently, Ars Technica, which is a tech news site. I actually had a couple at a period of experimentation. So in 2021, I started a Substack called Full Stack Economics. It went pretty well, but it was not as popular as it needed to be to make a living at it. And so right after ChatGPT came out in December 2022, I started thinking about kind of switching topics, and I launched a new newsletter called Understanding AI in March of 2023, and I've been writing that full time since then. Um, and it was, I mean, it's grown a lot over the last 2 years. It was pretty. One of the first pieces I wrote with a colleague in academia was just an explainer on how large language models work, and that proved pretty popular and has continued to be popular. It's in some like academic syllabi and stuff, so like people still read it a lot. So that was one of the pieces that was popular enough that it convinced me I should like continue doing AI as opposed to going back to covering economics or doing some other kind of newsletter. And then yeah, there's just a lot of people feel they want to like catch up on economics, and so my newsletter really tries to be accessible to a broad audience, but go a little bit more depth than you'll get at a kind of mainstream news publication.
And Andrea and Dr. Jetelina, you guys can collaborate together, or kind of share your responses.
Sure, I can give the origin story. So, March 2020, I think we all know what happened in March of 2020 in the world of public health. I started updating faculty, staff, and students. I was a researcher at the University of Texas of what the heck was going on. And those emails were daily, and I signed them Love Your Local Epidemiologist because that's who I was to them. A few days later, one of my students came to me and asked me if I could start putting this on social media so she didn't have to keep copying and pasting it for her family and friends. And I distinctly remember telling my husband, what the hell? I only have to do this for 6 weeks max, and then surely someone's going to pick up the baton and explain what the heck is going on, in understandable terms. And that didn't happen, and it grew and grew and grew on social media. Then in February of 2021, my social media accounts were hacked by anti-vaxxers. And I discovered very, very quickly that we only rent space from social media. We don't necessarily own it. And I probably would have never gotten my content back or my audience back, unless I had a girlfriend at Facebook headquarters that figured out how to get my stuff back. But at that moment, I switched to Substack. It was a whole lot easier than like Facebook posts. You can embed links, you can have pictures, you can have all this sort of stuff, as well as a whole lot of ownership around the content and the email listserv. And people can support your work there too, which was something that I didn't really explore before then. So I'm still there. I'm still there, and I guess it's my job and my company now is behind this platform. So it's been fun. It's been fun to build.
And Andrea, I know that you help, from my understanding, from what I've read, I could be wrong, but you help with a lot of the reporting. And then I was reading you guys had a great take on long COVID, right? Like comparing the prevalence of the likelihood of getting long COVID is similar to having reconstructive surgery on your hand if you got bit by a dog, or you provide really nice comparisons. So I saw some of your reporting, and then you also, if I'm correct, you share things on social media and come up with strategies to get the word out that way.
Yeah, so I started reading Your Local Epidemiologist when I was in college, and that is kind of my origin story into Substack and writing on Substack because I started reading Your Local Epidemiologist, and Katelyn would write this incredible state of affairs every week, which I would then regurgitate to my own COVID-19 lab every week. And they'd be like, oh my God, where did you hear that from? And I would say, Katelyn Jetelina, Your Local Epidemiologist. And then about 2 years later, when I was doing my master's in science communication, um, uh, we had like a list of internships we could choose to work with. And Your Local Epidemiologist was one of them. And I literally was shaking in my boots because that was one of the main reasons that I wanted to become a science, or one of the main inspirations I had to becoming a science journalist and science communicator. And so I sent Katelyn a cover letter, and I think since 2022, I occasionally freelance, contribute. I in 2000, yeah, 2023, I started working on a few state of affairs, reporting on ACIP meetings, and also doing a little bit of social media and still contribute every now and then.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to everyone. The second question I'm sort of curious is, the beauty of Substack for people who might be, attending and new to it, or, I can't wait to hear what everyone thinks if I'm, spot on with this, but you can publish content very fast and there's a lot happening in the world. So I know, Andrea and Dr. Jetelina, I always, I'm seeing daily, almost daily updates, right? There's a lot of things going on with food recalls, COVID, flu vaccines, just a variety of different topics that you are on the pulse on your reporting. I know you've grown the team out. And then the same with, Tim, I know I get your AI email updates all the time, and it's always really exciting to see that in the inbox. And then Dr. Thorp, I know that you're so busy, but I'm always really excited to see the events that you're going to. You have a very personal take on, sharing that personal side that you mentioned. So how do you do your editorial planning and kind of like find that right balance so that you're giving readers timely content? It's almost instantaneous, but then you also have sort of balance in your life, and I guess you're striking that right balance.
Well, I think the people who do it a lot more frequently than I do should explain that.
So I publish about once a week, which was a big step down from when I was in a traditional newsroom, and or technically they expect me to publish something every day. And my rhythm there would be I'd have longer pieces I was working on, but usually in the morning I'd spend 2 or 3 hours like writing kind of quick thing, and then go back, spend my afternoon doing reporting or working on a longer piece. For my current newsletter, everything's slowed down somewhat, so I try to publish something once a week, but I'll have something I'm working on for 2 or 3 weeks. But then if I go a week and I haven't published something, I'll kind of find something in the news and write something kind of quicker. Um, but that's my basic speed, and I try not to. But I'm not religious about it. I think a lot of people you'll hear this advice to like pick a schedule and stick to it, and I think that's good advice for like new writers or somebody who is worried about not having the discipline to have stuff on the site regularly. But what I've found, at least for my beat and the kind of stuff I write, is that there is a return to effort. Like I know how to write a pretty good piece, and so if I am expecting to write something this week and I work on the piece and I don't feel it's quite ready, and if I save it until Monday, it'll be better. I'll do that, and I found that tends to produce a better result than rushing it out and then having something that's like a little bit half baked, or where I didn't quite get all the information I would like to have in it. And so that's my approach. It's worked pretty well. I mean, I've been surprised. Um, so I have free subscribers and paid subscribers, and enough people pay to like make a living at it, with about half of my articles being paid. So basically, if you pay, you get 2 or 3 articles a month that you wouldn't get otherwise. And that that's and my newsletter costs $8 a month, so people are paying like $3 or $4 to get one of my articles. That seems like kind of a lot of money to me, but there's like hundreds of people who are willing to pay that, so it works out, and it's I mean, it's a huge luxury relative to previous jobs I've had where they did want stuff every day, to be able to do it at that low frequency. And I think they do. Apparently, they think it's good. I think people appreciate it. People's inboxes are very cluttered, so I don't think people necessarily want something every day. They want quality, and if you can deliver a few good things every month, I think people will be happy with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. I do a schedule, but for different reasons, I think. In the beginning, it was like when there was an update during COVID pandemic. Now I find ourselves in a bit, I guess I'll be careful with my words, a bit different emergency right now in public health. Um, but I agree with him. Like, inboxes are really cluttered. I think eventually we're gonna hit a threshold of like how many newsletters actually can land in an inbox. And so I try to be really thoughtful around what those updates are and how quickly you do them. One reason that I started at Cadence was just my team. I have a team of 20 now, and like my copy editor needed to know when I was gonna like write something so I don't throw her off and making dinner for her kids, and social media person and etc. So I think that Cadence is just more helpful for the team unit compared to when it was me as a one-woman show. Um, and so our cadence is, yeah, every Monday there's like an update. Every Wednesday there's like a little deeper dive into a topic. Every Thursday our state level newsletters go out, and then sometimes there's a Friday one, maybe once a month. But I mean, I also agree with Tim. Like, if it's not ready, if my copy editor's like, Katelyn, this is garbage, cannot see the light of day, like, I don't publish it. Like, I think it's way more important to have a good product and build trust and look like you actually know what you're talking about than some crappy thing just because we need something published. And my understanding is that's maybe a little different than traditional journalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on, well, it depends on a lot of factors, but like if for ad-supported publications, I mean, no publication would say we're like putting garbage out, but there's always, if your business model is like ad-supported, like website, more content's always better from a business perspective, because you don't have subscribers who are gonna like unsubscribe if you send them too much content, and so that makes it a little bit different. I do think it's like I do think it matters somewhat kind of what stage of your journalism career you are, or if you're a professional journalist or like an amateur. I do think it's a good, if you're just starting out doing a newsletter, it could be a good just discipline to be like, I'm gonna do this every Friday, because then you kind of force yourself to write, and you force yourself. I mean, I think especially newer writers, could like get too much in their own head, and like they go, if I do this, if I spend a number of the week on this, it'll be amazing. And like sometimes that's true, but sometimes you just need to get it out there. But I think, yeah, absolutely, once you kind of have an audience that you're like responsible to, you want to be respectful of their time, and so that often means waiting and putting more work into something if it's not ready.
Yeah, I think one thing that hadn't been mentioned yet is, and there probably aren't too many people locked into this, but I still write a column that has to fit on one piece of printed paper in a in something that many of the people on this call probably never seen, which is a magazine. And but we have a lot of older readers who still get the printed copy of Science. I always say, we print it for people who've always read it in print, and then we print it so that our authors can give a copy to their parents when they get a paper in our journal. Um, so, and that locks me into 720 words. We did redesign the magazine, and I convinced the visuals department to make it so that I could run 2 pages if I wanted, but my editor hates that. She thinks I should be able to say everything in 720 words. And of course, I can't put any pictures, links, YouTube videos, anything like that. So when I have something that I want to put a lot more material up, and a lot of times it's something that goes with my 720 words on the piece of paper in the magazine, Substack is really, really good for that. I mean, you can put videos and, I haven't started making podcasts yet, but it's obviously a very convenient tool for that. And, I have to be careful not to be redundant with our own newsletter, Science Advisor, which we send to 150,000 people every, 5 days a week. And Christy Wilcox, who does that, is a real pro at newsletters. And so it's just kind of part of the overall picture.
It's really interesting to think about how to complement those and then make sure that each have their own distinct, spaces and voices and verticals. I'm also a huge fan of the print version of Science
Oh,
and
good.
reading all the online articles in Substack. So this is going to bring up sort of our third question is everyone here is going to measure their own success on Substack, right? It could be qualitative, hearing from, readers that maybe you explained something that they didn't understand before, it made sense for them. It could be quantitative, seeing, something that you posted at just the right time has this massive reach and maybe influence, health outcomes or the trajectory of something that's happening in, in the world. So how do you measure success on Substack? We
I
can jump
can
in with whoever wants to.
Sure, I can jump in. I guess people still read it. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of I mean, I'm a data person, I'm a scientist, and so there's a lot of metrics we pay attention to, um, including growth rate, including percent who are paid, including open rate. I mean, I think it's basically all the same sort of metrics. I'm not in the journalism world that journalists look at to see if a article did well or not. One of the other thing that's really important to me is I pay attention to who forwards the email because that shows me organic growth and use. Like if it's useful, I feel like people are going to forward it to their family and friends or their team at the Department of Health. The other thing I really look to is comments. We 90%, 80 to 90% of the content at YLE, my newsletter, is not what I think is important, but it's the questions and concerns that we hear from readers and are directly responsive to. And so usually if there's like no, very limited, usually I get, I don't know, 120, 130 comments per thing, but if there's only like 12, that's a sign to me that maybe it wasn't interesting enough or didn't prompt any deep thinking or any follow-up questions. But would be curious to hear, yeah, what Tim and Holden pay attention to.
So I would say one of the things that I really like about Substack is that because you get the goal is to get signups and then hopefully upgrades to paid signups, as opposed to like if you're a display ad website, you're really focused on page views, and that I think creates healthier incentives because with a advertising supported site, if they click, that's great. It doesn't matter if they actually like the article or not. Whereas with Substack, it only you only make it only benefits the publication if they like it enough to give you their email address. And so that I think nudges me in the direction of like doing higher quality. But it's also like, at least for my publication, I bet this is true for a lot of it's not tied to a specific article. Substack has a very nice recommendation mechanism where if you sign up for a new if you sign up for a Substack, it'll suggest 3 other newsletters on Substack that you should subscribe to, and that accounts for probably 10 or 20% of my growth. And then there's just a lot of I don't know, every day a bunch of people sign up, and Substack doesn't have great like tools for tracking like where that comes from, whether that's people coming to evergreen articles, whether that's forwards. I have some educated guesses, but anyway, so I would say I worry a lot less about like the kind of hard metrics that I did at previous jobs, because it doesn't seem like I mean, you do get some signal. I mean, if you get a lot of page views on an article, that's better than not. If you get a lot of likes or a lot of social media shares, so I do pay some attention to that. But yeah, I can be a little more chill and like focus on just kind of making the content good. And then yeah, it's obviously nice. Like I mentioned, I have one of my pieces is on some college syllabi, and the something I just published yesterday that I've done a couple versions of is just looking at the crashes that Waymo's done, and I've heard that that's kind of circulated among policymakers as evidence for is how safe is this technology. And so yeah, it's always nice to hear about that kind of impact. But it's really hard to measure. I mean, there's no statistics on it. You just kind of hear through word of mouth that people like something or thought something was helpful.
I tried to take a Waymo in Phoenix last week, and I called it twice, and it got lost coming to get me, and I gave up.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
Yeah. But yeah, just to affirm what Katelyn said, for our newsletters that are, more institutional on science.org, like Science Advisor, we track those very same parameters that she's talking about, open rate, and we like to look and see how many clicks we get on the very last link in the newsletter, because that tells us at least that somebody scrolled all the way to the bottom. We hope they read all the way to the bottom, but when the things that we have at the bottom get more clicks, that's something that we like to see.
And Andrea, I know you have been doing a lot of newsletter support and help at Scientific American too. Is that correct? Do you have insights that you share, like maybe quantitative or qualitative about things you found have worked really well?
Yeah, I write for Today in Science, which is Scientific American's daily newsletter. And there's like an open rate, and you can see how many people click on the links. Those are like the quantifiable measures of success in regards to the newsletter, but also seeing like how we can engage people through the newsletter. So Scientific American recently celebrated its 180th anniversary, and there was a competition that happened, and people had to hold up a magazine cover and insert into the competition. And you could do this via numerous ways, through social media, like Instagram, through Blue Sky. Email was another option. And I think one of the largest amounts of people who were like entering this competition came from the Today in Science newsletter. So it was just like a cool way to see how people engaged with the newsletter. And as for when I've written for Your Local Epidemiologist in the past, echoing Katelyn, like the comments were one of like the biggest ways to see, and she has such an engaging community too. Also hearing from family members or friends, or when I meet new people who are in the field of public health and they're like, oh yeah, I was just reading a public health newsletter, having no idea that I was in any way associated with it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool that like people are talking about this on the streets. Like, yeah, it's really it's awesome.
And the fourth question, this kind of dovetails on what we were talking about, but we were thinking about growth and really tailoring content for the audience, right? Sort of giving them, I know you guys are doing a great job with this, coming up with that balanced content. So this is going to be sort of a two-part question, is one on Substack, where historically, and like to get everyone's perspective, but it seems like it's sort of been like bring your own audience, right? But then there's a lot of opportunities for growth, and expansion on the site once you're there. So how, once you first started and as it's grown, like how have you helped support its popularity, helped grow its size? And then two, are there subscription models that, you found really worked for you over time? And I know we've touched on this a little bit. Some people may publish content, free as a public service, public benefit. Other people may have options if people want to donate to scientific philanthropy, their organization support the team. And I know like Tim, very low monthly rate where if you have tens of thousands of subscribers and followers, it could be comparable to the salary you'd have working at a newsroom, making it a sustainable career to really be able to, stay engaged and report in this space. So feel free if anyone wants to jump in.
So the question, Jessica, was like, what is the subscription model that we all use?
Yeah, and it could be you can answer like one or both parts, but like how have you grown your Substack? And then like what subscription model do you think works well?
Um, I guess I'll jump in. Grown is very organic for me, which I mean, you can imagine we're in the middle of a pandemic, so that wasn't too difficult. And also now there's just a lot happening in the health policy space that's impacting everyday lives, and so really, people are very interested, and so there's a lot of organic growth. Lately, I've also been doing, we have marketing and some advertising arm of Wiley that has also been helping. Subscription model, my newsletter is a very mission forward, so there's very little behind the paywall. I think readers, it's more of like an NPR sort of model where people pay because they believe in the mission and the value that it's bringing. Some things that are behind the paywall are like the comment section. Um, uh, One reason I do that is not just for payment, but just to get all the trolls away. Like I figured if you're paying, you really want to be a part of the conversation and you're not insane. I think also, but there's also other, we've been trying to be creative in other ways, like a webinar only paid subscribers can go to. We've started doing like a behind the curtain at Wirely. So like what are tips that we're using of talking about vaccine mandates, for example, that others can use. Um, so I guess that's been my model. So people can pay monthly or yearly or just donate into like a fiscal sponsor site as well.
I talked about this a little bit before, so I think a big part of my growth is just the topic. I mean, a little bit similar to Katelyn's situation. I mean, it's not an emergency the way COVID was, but like lots of people in 2023, 2024 just felt they like needed to understand AI, and so doing like a pretty good newsletter on a topic a lot of people want, I think just turned out to be a good move. And I think something for kind of viewers who are maybe thinking about doing this, I think that it's really important to have clear branding and like a name and a presentation that like makes it clear what you get when you sign up. I think a lot of people will have kind of a cutesy name or a kind of elliptical name. My newsletter is called Understanding AI, which is like the most like boring name you could possibly have for an AI newsletter. But I think like I want if somebody comes to my newsletter is like, what's this newsletter about? I want them to know like this is what you're getting. So anyway, I think that was the main kind of growth thing was just um, clearly said what people got, and there's a lot of people that wanted that thing. I mean, previously I had this economics newsletter that I think was about as good, but it's just there's a lot more economics newsletters out there. There isn't like a lot of like people who are hungry for a new one. Um, I would say the one other thing I did that if you're an established journalist thinking to jump into Substack might be an option is I syndicated some of my articles back to Ars Technica, the previous publication I wrote for. I just gave them to them for free in exchange for a link to my newsletter, and I got some of my fans who'd read me on the previous site were able to subscribe to the new newsletter, and then some of those I was able to upsell, and so I ended up making some decent money from that and staying connected to that community. So that was one strategy I used. Otherwise, it's just the usual stuff, write stuff that goes viral on Hacker News or Reddit or Twitter or whatever. And like I said, the recommendation feature. In terms of my subscription model, it's about 50-50 free and paid. Don't tell the subscribers, but the good stuff goes in front of the paywall. The lower quality stuff goes behind the paywall for the most part. And yeah, that's about it. And about 2 to 3% pay. So the vast majority don't pay. But if you have tens of thousands of people, I'm making a little more than I did when I had my previous job, but it took a couple of years to get there.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers on mine are much smaller than all these, but I've done a lot of experiments. So one experiment I did was, so there's a blog on the science website, which is mainly where we just put announcements and things. And so for a while, a lot of times I would do a column where there was a long interview with somebody and I'd paste the whole interview somewhere else. And for a while, I experimented putting them on the editor's blog on the science website and on Substack. And if social is driving the traffic, it's a wash whether social would drive people to one or the other. So if I had one that was going to do well on social anyway, putting it on Substack didn't make that much difference, except that half the traffic went there and made the traffic people at Science grouchy. Uh, but if it wasn't going to do all that well, the email traffic from Substack would be the biggest part of what it would get. So the thing about putting something on, a static website and promoting it with social versus having it on Substack is that the email opens could end up being, and for these large newsletters like Katelyn and Tim's, is going to be a huge part of the traffic. So it really it mystifies me, as everybody said, why people want so many newsletters, but that's where a big part of the traffic is coming from.
Yeah,
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think for me, the free and the paid pieces serve a different purpose, right? The free ones, you want to like travel as widely as possible so new people find about your newsletter. Whereas the paid ones are, you want your existing paid readers to feel like they're getting their money's worth. And so they have kind of a different style. And yeah, the different. When I'm starting writing a piece, I think about, is this something I think has the potential to reach a big audience, or is it something more my like hardcore fans are interested in? And that kind of determines like which bucket I put into, which then has some impact on kind of how I write the piece and how I promote it.
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, I mean, something like Katelyn's that has 500,000 subscribers or whatever it is, I mean, we don't get very many stories on science.org that get to 500,000 people. So we can have some that, go many times more than that. But the average story on a static website like ours, we're happy if it's in the tens of thousands of page views. So a Substack that has 100,000 or more subscribers is pretty powerful voice in the news world. And just to put that in perspective, I mean, reproducibly, the highest profile thing on the science website is the Science Advisor newsletter. I mean, reproducibly. Now there's things that could get much bigger than that, but on a day-to-day basis, that's reaching as much people as many people as per content that we put on there as we can, which just shows you the inexplicable power of email.
Fantastic. It's really useful to hear everyone's, perspective, kind of, what works and what you found over time. Our last question, and we'll open it up. We'll have time for questions among, the panelists and the audience, is if you had, a pearl of wisdom that you wanted to share with everyone who's attending tonight, who might walk away and say, "Oh, I want to do this. I want to get on Substack and, start my own vertical or, newsletter." What would it be? What have you found worked really well? What didn't? What would be your advice to the science writers and communicators here this evening?
I have two pieces of advice. One is just start. I think that at least with me, I just like dove in talking to 30 people, not ever imagining what it could have ever become. And I think that the second is be your authentic self. I think we're entering an age where people do want to hear from Holden Thorp and his experience with autism in this world. And I think people do want to hear from Katelyn Jetelina. They do not want to hear from a brick wall of the CDC. And so humans trust other humans. And I think that it is where the media world is going, and people want connection and community. And if I always try to ground myself in that as a scientist, I'm very bad at being authentic and being a human being, but it is what is needed at this moment, and that would be my advice.
I would say think very carefully about your topic and audience. I think that I said this before, but I just think it's really important. Is like um, you want people to have a clear idea what they're getting, and you want to write a newsletter that's appealing to a specific group of people. In my case, it's people that want to read about AI, but um, it's the more narrow your topic is, the easier it is kind of get you started. You don't want to be so narrow that the maximum possible audience is small, but yeah, you want to have a clear idea of who you're writing for, what's your kind of theory of why they're reading you, what kind of value you're getting, and that could vary. I mean, for science writing, it's usually going to be kind of explanatory, but for other, there's like politics newsletters that have like different approaches. But yeah, you want to have a clear theory of like who's your audience, why are they reading, and then make sure you're clearly communicating that. The other thing I guess I would say is it depends a lot whether you're like planning to do it full time versus kind of on the side. I think if you're doing it on the side, then get started is great advice. Some professional journalists may not have the option, like some publications won't let their employees like build their own audience on the side, and so then you have to kind of make the decision whether to like make that jump. And for that, I would say uh, make sure you have some runway. It took me about 2 years to get back to the point where I was making what I was making. Actually, a little more than that because I had the like unsuccessful newsletter before the successful one. So yeah, you need to be depending, and this also depends on kind of your level of how well known you are in your field or how big of an audience there is for you. But it is, I think, not easy to build an audience. And so if you are like the primary breadwinner uh, in your family, it can be quite difficult to do. I have my wife makes more money than me, so I had the luxury to kind of do extra childcare and do it a little bit part time for a couple of years until it gained traction. But I don't, obviously not everybody has that opportunity.
Yeah, and my observation, since I still work in both, well, I mostly work in the regular journalism world, and sometimes do this, is that as I watch newsletters like these two and others that are, people I know, as I watch them grow, they end up adopting a lot of the same infrastructure and things that traditional journalism has. I mean, they get copy editors, they get fact checkers, they get visuals people who uh, who make stuff. They eventually need their own social folks, and we have all those things at science.org, and when as these things grow, they're going to get it. It doesn't mean you can't do it by yourself when you're starting, but as they scale, I mean, I've never seen one of these things scale past 100,000 subscribers where they didn't need to start bringing on a lot of the same things that we have at traditional static websites.
And Andrea, what about you? I know that you have a unique perspective because you're writing for a lot of different outlets and publications and across a lot of different platforms as well.
Yeah, I definitely I never really post on my Substack unless I'm writing for your local epidemiologist, but I guess my one pearl of wisdom is, I guess, to read other Substack letters, and there's like a huge variety and diversity of Substack letters, and one of the only reasons I started writing on Substack was because I started reading on Substack and got to see how different public health folks communicated, and now I'm like following chefs on Substack and following recipes on there and getting fashion advice, and there's so many different ways to communicate things you're passionate about. And I don't know if I will ever like upscale my personal Substack or write as I grow as a journalist. Um, but yeah, and I think having a community of like other writers and people to like read, it takes teamwork too, or like people who can support and like give you that like I don't know, read that first draft and be like, hey, no, this is great, just put it out. But yeah, that's what I would say. But I'm definitely so new to this, and I'm definitely not making bread off of this. But
One day.
yeah, so I'm also absorbing the pearls of wisdom here.
Fantastic. Well, it's really interesting to think, Dr. Thorpe, thank you for mentioning there's so much like new that's happening in this space, right? You're kind of moving with it, but then you're still relying on those old principles, a traditional format, kind of bringing everything together. And it seems like it's there's a lot of shared connections, and then for some people or some Substacks, certain things really, work better than others. So maybe a little trial and error for everyone too. What I'm going to do is pass it over to Liz. We had some questions come in through the chat that I didn't get a chance to see, but I know that she's been monitoring this. And so I'll go ahead, pass it to her, and then put everyone's links and bios in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jessica. And everybody has been fantastic. And thank you to all of you participants who have been sending in questions. Feel free to keep them coming in the Q&A box. So let's see. The first one I see is from Scott, who asks, how does Substack compare to other self-publishing sites like Medium, WordPress, or starting your own website? Does it vary based on how you want to use the site or the number of users? Yeah, does anybody want to comment on other self-publishing sites that you might have used?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So the biggest difference is Substack's an email newsletter site first and foremost. It has an app and stuff, but that's the main use case. And as a former kind of blogger, I think it's much nicer because with Substack, your readership is sticky. If somebody likes you enough to get in their email, then they're going to get everything you read. I mean, we used to have like RSS feeds and stuff, so theoretically you could do this with blogs, but it was much clumsier. And so you're just gonna if it's something you're publishing consistently over time, you're just going to end up with a much bigger audience with newsletters. There are other email newsletter platforms. I used one called Ghost, that's kind of the open source version of Substack before, and it was fine, but it was kind of a hassle. I like Substack better, and Substack also has the recommendation feature I mentioned earlier, which Ghost doesn't. There's some other ones out there, but in my opinion, like Substack has the most kind of turnkey experience and some features that you're not going to find on other email platforms.
Yeah, and I would just say, don't underestimate the technical sophistication of being able to do email as well as it does. We have a few things on our regular website that send emails, and I mean, this is true of journal websites in general. A lot of people don't understand why we're so restricted in a lot of the things that we can do, but and there's all kinds of reasons for that. But the technical facility with which the site does email is not something to be underestimated. I mean, it's that is not a trivial thing to pull off.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the next question. So Melanie asks, how do you engage on Substack? Do you use the chat features? Obviously, you all have newsletters, but like, to what extent are you engaging with your audience, and how are you doing that?
We're experimenting a lot. So we definitely engage in the comment section, but there's also this chat feature. There's this live video feature. We do webinars now. And so really, I don't know which one is best, but I think this grounds in a really essential part of building a newsletter is you're building a community. And at least with mine, I really want it to be a two-way street. And because I think that's what a lot of ivory towers in public health are missing. And so I don't know, any way to ask questions, engage, understand where people's heads are at, I think the better.
Thanks. Does anybody else have like a specific approach? Like, do you try to like respond to comments like on a weekly basis, anything like that?
I definitely subscribe to comments. I don't like the app features because one of the real benefits of Substack that nobody's mentioned, I think, yet is that Substack gives you the ability to download all of the email addresses of your subscribers, which means unlike almost all other social platforms, you are not locked into their platform. If you don't like anything about them, you can download those email addresses, and in like an hour, you can be on Ghost or some other platform. And so I like, and that only works because most of my readers do in fact get the emails and would be happy to get my emails through a different platform. And so these other things, the notes and the chats and the live videos and stuff, like I'll do them occasionally, but I really try to stay away from those because I want to think of it as an email platform where I have a direct relationship with my readers, as opposed to building like Substack's business, which I mean, Substack is a perfectly nice company, but that's not really why I'm here. So I do use the comment feature, and sometimes people will email me back. And I'm active on Twitter, so there's various ways I interact with people. But yeah, it's the Substack specific features I have mixed feelings about.
Cool. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. Robert is asking, in addition to Substack, what other platforms do you use and how do you repurpose content for each one? I know Tim has talked about sometimes publishing the same thing on Ars Technica, but yeah, do you guys have any strategies for like, do you use like LinkedIn or other social media to like maybe excerpt or even duplicate your newsletter?
I have a social media manager, and so she like repurposes for Instagram and Threads and Twitter and I don't know, all of them. I mean, there's such different audiences though. Like who's reading my newsletter is so different than the moms on Instagram or the grandmas on Facebook or whoever the heck is left on X. So like there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done when translating my Substack newsletter content to other platforms to reach that different audiences. The thing I would be curious if others are in this space, but like the other thing that I have a really hard time with around social media is there's very little return on investment. So like it's more of a public service to get it on social media than it is like part of the business model that keeps the machine running. And so there's this balance that I always have to find around how much do we really want to be on social media because very few actually come from social media to the newsletter because people on Instagram like getting their content in Instagram-ish stuff rather than in their inbox. So it comes down to, again, just different audiences. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's always been terrible for click-throughs. Facebook used to be. So at Science, we have, 5 million on Twitter and 6 million on Facebook or something like that. Uh, Twitter has always been terrible for getting clicks through to a story. Um, Facebook used to be pretty good and it was worthwhile to post there. And, we have a lot of older people who are probably still on Facebook. But that's changed since the traffic apocalypse or whatever you want to call this thing that happened where they've changed the nature of how they do the news feed. So I agree with Katelyn that you don't- you know I, you don't do social media in order to drive people to any other site. I mean, the levels of clicking that happen are pretty miserable on every platform. I don't I'm not on Twitter and Blue Sky anymore. That's not enough characters for me. The character limit just gets me into trouble. So it was better for my mental health to get off of those. I highly recommend that if anybody else is considering that. I have more followers on LinkedIn than anywhere else, so I tend to focus on that. And the content moderation sure is a lot better than these other things.
Yeah, I agree with everybody that social. This is a big change. Like 10 years ago, social was very important for like most like online native news organizations strategy. Like for a while, Facebook was very important. In the early years, Twitter did have some value. But yeah, nowadays Twitter has nerfed Substack links, so they actually, if you like put a link in, they like downrank it in people's feeds. which is why you'll sometimes see people like put a screenshot of their article, but not the actual article, and then put the link to the article in like the next tweet, because people think that has less of a penalty. Anyway, so I guess yeah, my advice would be don't force yourself. I think some people like they start a Substack, they might have to like have an Instagram strategy or a Twitter strategy or a whatever strategy. I think if you're already on a platform, if you enjoy a platform, if you have an existing audience, like I have a Twitter audience, so I post on Twitter because I like being on Twitter, and I have like an existing readership there. But if you're somebody new that isn't on Twitter, you definitely should not like put much effort into like building yourself a Twitter presence. And I think the same is probably true of anywhere else. You should, and there's also those probably depend somewhat on your topic. So for whatever reason, the AI community is mostly on Twitter, and so just from a reporting perspective, I need to be on Twitter, so I kind of want to know what people are talking about. If maybe your beat, it's on LinkedIn or it's on Instagram or something, and so yeah, you should go where your readers are, and where your sources are, and where you're gonna like learn. But if it's not obvious to you which platform you are, and there's not a platform you already like you definitely should not like go on one because you think it's going to bring traffic in, because that's not going to happen. The other thing is sometimes people will share your content for you, like other people will post my articles on Twitter, and so yeah, I just wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, that's such a huge departure from the era in which like oh, like we must post the thing in order to get traffic to the thing. Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
that's over.
Yeah, it's good. So, I mean, do you all feel like the way, like your biggest driver of traffic is word of mouth, or like what would you say is like the biggest driver?
Mine is word of mouth, but Timothy brought this up earlier. There's like this network effect behind Substack, which is really quite powerful for smaller newsletters and has helped a lot of growth. And so when like Tim or I like recommend a smaller newsletter, like so I know some newsletters I've gotten like 40,000 subscribers just because I recommend them. Because they get like this, I don't know actually how it works, but like they get an email saying like this they recommended blah blah blah, and then people click on it. So there's like this whole network effect that Substack is trying to build on the back end. And I'll be honest, like I was really skeptical about it. I was like, how are you guys going to build a network behind there? But it does drive quite a lot of traffic, and can really help jumpstart and catapult some newsletters. And so there's quite a bit of teamwork and recommendations, and especially in content and fields that you believe in.
Yeah, the way I think about this is like every platform and medium is its own thing. And so like if you're building a podcast, the best way to get new podcast listeners is to have other podcasters mention you on their podcast, because podcast listeners have their podcast player open and they'll like do it. And email is kind of the same way. The best way to get new readers for your newsletter is to have another email newsletter recommend you, because everybody on that newsletter by definition is interested in email newsletters, probably on Substack, may already have their credit card on Substack. And so yeah, thinking about um, anyway, like so succeeding on the Substack platform, which mostly means getting other hopefully larger newsletters to recommend your newsletter, is by far the most important thing for that you can do for growth. And there's this kind of like dark fact. There's just like mysterious aspect of like probably email forwards or word of mouth. Like it's hard to say where other people come from, but you get a lot of signups that just you don't know how they found your newsletter. If you're doing well, they just do.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. So we have a question from Chad. Have you tried to work any special graphics into your newsletters, and what are the best practices for that? Do you guys pay attention? Do you put a lot of visuals in your newsletters?
I do. I mean, I look at like disease trends and maps and all of that sort of stuff. So, and I'm a visual learner, so I like including that sort of stuff in my newsletter. It's super easy to do. Even an epidemiologist can figure it out.
Yeah, certain kind of charts can go viral. But it's really, I think really when I had an economics newsletter, I did a lot of charts because people like to like look at charts of like things that are happening in the economy. I found it harder for AI, so I think it's really specific to what you're covering and what kind of data is out there.
I tend to just have photographs and video from, people I'm going to talk to and things like that. but it's just so convenient to do that. Really nice.
Very cool. Okay, so Robert asks, do you make use of AI in your work? Obviously, Tim's whole deal is AI, but do you guys actually use AI to help you like generate, subject lines or keep track of things?
Yeah, I use it for two things. I use it for research. When I'm starting a piece, sometimes it's just stuff I need to find out there. I'll ask, ChatGPT with like deep research, like look into, has anybody made this argument, or find me the best papers to read on this topic as kind of a starting point. Obviously, I read the stuff before I rely on it, but that's one thing. And then there's copy editing. I'll ask it to make me a list of spelling and grammar mistakes, and it's gotten pretty good. It'll usually catch most of the typos.
Yeah, I think the search engines for finding things in the literature are just getting better and better. And I use several of them. But I just had a column today about how important it is to go through and actually, as Tim said, check it yourself. You're still responsible for what's in there. And there's a disturbingly high number of bad citations in the literature. So I'm worried that AI is going to make that worse, even though it'll expedite us finding the things that we want. So that should give us even more time to check to make sure we're citing the right thing. And I got to go in a second too. I think Katelyn had to leave.
Andrea, did you want to respond to that question? Okay. Well, Holden, thank you so much for being
Yep.
here. Let's see, I know we still have like a lot of questions and such, but actually, Holden, before you jump off,
Yeah.
Jessica, did you want to sort of wrap up our session here?
Yeah, so thank you so much for everyone for attending and sharing the knowledge. I know we could have, gone on for much longer and really dived into actual aspects of science writing, right? In addition to really getting into all of the Substack logistics. And so we appreciate everyone's time, expertise. We encourage everyone who attended and still has questions, follow the panelists, stay connected, and feel free to also email us if there's something that you really are curious about. We can help answer those questions, facilitate connections if possible. And we really appreciate everyone coming out tonight.
Yeah. And thanks to DC Science Writers for everything you're doing for DC and the world.
For sure, thank you. And if you are not a member of DCSWA, you can join at DCSWA.org, which I will put in the chat. And as I mentioned at the top, my name is Liz Landau. I'm the president of DCSWA, and we are having a happy hour at the Crooked Run Brewery on the 25th of September, the one that is located in DC near the NOMA metro station. So yes, please follow us, subscribe to our DCSWA newsletter, which is called The Quacker, because we are ducks. And I hope to see you all again soon. And again, thank you so much to our amazing panelists and to Jessica for moderating such a great session.
See you all later.
Great. Thanks so much.